So, can I start with codependency? Can you tell me a bit about how you became interested in working in this area?
Well, codependency means there's a lots of people give it lots of different definitions. Um, in the addiction environment, they would say a codependent is a caretaker.
Hmm.
But I think codependency is a lot more than that. A codependent is somebody who is really lost to themselves. They it's the lost self, and they look for validation externally. The codependent, and that is what I find. That's what I found for myself. I didn't realize I was doing it. That all my validation was sought externally, so it gave people a lot of power over me, and that's what I find that a lot of clients who come in to therapy, they look for external validation, and that causes them to be at the mercy of people, and this can cause them to either want to literally suck people in to get that feeling of wholeness, or for fear of rejection, they push people away. But it's all the same fear that causes them to be under it's the same fear anyway that causes them to be codependent. They either push people away or suck people in.
Okay. Okay. So it sounds like it's quite confusing for them. So they're looking to other people to say, oh, I'm a good person, you're happy with me, then I'm happy. Is that right?
Yeah.
If you're not happy with me, then I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah. So their mood goes up and down with other people's mood.
So it's controlled by your mood, not mine.
Yeah.
My happiness is controlled by how you are.
Yeah. Me. Or how you see me.
Yeah.
Or I need you to like me for me to like myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or I need you to approve of me for me to approve of myself. Or it's very performance related as well. So it is, again, as I say, very externally validated, which leaves us very lost to ourselves. Yeah. So we don't become our true self. Yeah. It's a very vulnerable place to be.
Oh yeah. It's I can imagine. So it's what I think you want me to be, I will try to be that.
Yeah.
For you to accept me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So what are the 3 ways that dysfunctional family systems can present?
Well, first of all, the link between being codependent and the dysfunctional family system is that we become codependent when we grow up in a family system that doesn't meet our needs.
Okay.
And the family system can come in various shapes and sizes, right? Different forms. In my work, I found that those forms can take the place of maybe a narcissistic family system, where it could be both parents are narcissistic. And what I mean by narcissistic is that everything is centered around the parents' needs. Okay. Right? Then you can have a codependent family system. And again, everything is centered around the parents' needs, because the parents are focused on getting the approval externally too, the approval of people outside the family. So they could be caught up in religion, for example. Yeah? And then the child's needs are not going to be met. And I've worked with that quite a bit. And then you could have the codependent and narcissistic family system, where again the child's needs are not going to be met, where the mother or the father is meeting the needs of the narcissist within the family, and trying to please the narcissist within the family, and they're codependent on the narcissist, but they're still not meeting the child's needs.
Yeah.
So we've got then, 3 different kind of setups there, but in all of them the child's needs are not being met.
Child is lost.
The child is lost.
Mm.
And the child then can actually grow up then and leave that family system not knowing they have a right for their needs to be met, and actually not know that and who they are, because their voice has never been heard. Yeah. Because it's always the parents' voice that was heard, or the parents' needs that were met. So they go out, not realizing that they have a right to be heard, or they have a right for their needs to be met.
Okay.
And that leaves them actually quite vulnerable in many places. That leaves them vulnerable even in organisations. Yeah.
Okay.
Leaves them vulnerable in schools. It leaves them vulnerable just in society generally.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So do you think society plays a role or has a part to play in this?
Yeah, so society in the form of that, or society in the form of children in the school bullying, or society in the form of the church. The church has a lot of control, or had in the past, So I think in some ways it suits society to have codependent people that they can control, because then they have power, right? And some teachers, that suits some teachers, and the church in the past like to have power, and we have to be aware of that. And when I talk about narcissism later, I think that can happen quite a bit.
Okay, I'll be looking forward to that coming up. Thank you for that. So what way do codependents behave?
Okay, codependents tend to, they find it difficult to make a decision. Yeah, they tend to look for other people's approval, before they will make a decision. If they do make a decision, they apologise. They'll apologise when there's nothing to apologise for. They justify themselves all the time. They'll explain themselves. And why do they explain themselves? They explain themselves because they are looking for approval from the other person to validate what they're thinking is right. Like, is it okay to feel this way? Is it okay to think this way? In fact, they don't know what they feel. Because I remember my first time in therapy, when the therapist asked me, Margaret, how do you feel? I didn't know how I felt. I didn't even know I had a right to feel. I could tell her how everybody else felt, right? But I hadn't agreed how I felt. So codependents are very aware of how other people feel, but not how they feel. Very opposite to a narcissist. A narcissist will know how they feel, but they haven't agreed how anybody else feels.
So why does a codependent behave this way?
They behave this way because obviously they've come from a narcissistic family background, and they behave this way to keep people on side, because again, then they can be sure they're not going to be rejected, because they have a hole here, and the only way that they can feel whole is by having that external validation, and therefore then they feel complete. I really believe that actually narcissists and codependents come from the same family background, right? And it's like as if that the narcissist has completed a journey, right, where the codependent has stopped here. Yeah, and they're looking for that completion in other people. Yeah, that maybe the narcissist has completed. And that's maybe why, when we talk about it later, the codependent is drawn to the narcissist. Yeah, they see a strength in the narcissist that they haven't completed, and the narcissist sees something in them that they know isn't complete, so that they can actually take control of them. Yeah, that makes any sense?
It sounds almost like the predators.
Yeah. So it's like codependence, like honey to the bee, which is the narcissist. Yeah. So it's like that's the way I would see it.
But the narcissist, I know you're going to talk about that in a minute, but it sounds like they're predatory.
Yeah.
Like they know what to look for.
Yeah, it's actually quite hard to separate codependency and narcissism. They're actually two sides of the same coin. And that's, when I'm given a course on this subject, I find it hard to know where to start. And when I'm trying to separate them into 2 days, I find it hard to separate them into 2 days because they really do come together. And the great thing is, though, if we actually help the codependent to get well, maybe the narcissists cannot get so strong. I think we feed narcissists. I don't think it's fair just to blame codependents on narcissists getting stronger, but I do think if we become weller, ourselves, I don't think that they can, like honey to bees, I don't think the bee will get fed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'd be worried what might happen then.
Yeah.
So, would you have many clients that are codependent?
As I said earlier, I think every client that walks in the door is codependent. And when we work from this model, it is really helpful. I work from this model, and therapy does not have to take years. They actually move forward very quickly. When we work from this model and put this name on it, it gives them clarity immediately. They now can put a name on something. Like when I was able to put alcoholism on my alcohol intake, or my alcohol, my lack of control over my alcohol intake, it gave me clarity. I now knew what meetings to go to. I now knew what illness I had. It's like a person struggling with cancer knowing what treatment to get. So the codependent now knows, what meetings to go to, what books to read. And I've had some therapists on my courses being really resistant to putting a name on things. But by the end they say, yeah, no, I can see the logic of that actually. And my clients have been very open to accepting a name being put on. They now know that they are not mad, they're not odd, they don't feel alone anymore, and they have clarity because now they know where to go to look for help, they know what to read, and it's amazing how quickly they move forward.
Yeah, also as well, they know it's real.
Yeah.
What's going on here is not right.
That's right.
It's not right and it's real. There is a name for it now. I know what it is. It was never me.
Yeah, but even in their codependency, it is them.
Yeah.
And it is their, but they can actually change how they're thinking, and they can start to take their power back. For maybe the first time in their lives, they can start to connect to themselves. Actually, codependency is, when we're codependent, we're attached to everybody else, but we're completely disconnected from ourselves. So I often say to people, cut the strings that you have attached to everybody else and start to connect the string to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what they start to do. But when there's a name on it, they know they're not going mad, and they know now what they have to work on.
So do you feel that the addiction centres are good about picking up codependency?
No, actually. I think they see codependency just as the caretaker of an alcoholic. But I see codependency as a central addiction that's really missed. And I think it causes, that because it's not named, I think it's not named enough. Because I had a client who was struggling with codependency in the way I'm describing it, other than addiction of a caretaker of an alcoholic. And when she phoned looking for help, they were saying, what are you talking about? But if it was looked at as actually the lost self, and pleasing people to get external validation, and actually named as that, and named as an addiction to people pleasing, right? I think people would relapse less. I'll give you an example. I had one lady come, and she kept relapsing in her alcoholism. And I said to her, I said, how come you're not going to your AA meetings? And she said to me, she said, every time I go to those meetings, I end up giving people a lift. I said, what, why are you giving people a lift? And I discovered she couldn't say no. So, in fact, what was happening was her codependency was getting in the way of her going to her meetings. That same lady also was going to the golf club, and she wanted to leave at 6. Somebody had asked her to stay till 8, 9. She started to get bored, and she'd end up drinking. So codependency was getting in the way of her because she'd end up getting bored, she'd drink, so she'd end up relapsing. Another example would be a young man who was in recovery from gambling, and he started to get bored in his. He was going to his meetings in his gambling. What he started to do was go online, and he was getting involved in porn sites. And when I asked him what it is that was driving you to get involved in porn sites, he actually said that he could be somebody that he couldn't be when he was with people, really, because he was able to hide behind an alias. And again then, and because of the stress of that, he went back gambling. Okay, so the codependency that wasn't addressed when he was being treated for his gambling caused him to relapse into his old addiction. So if codependency isn't named, which he needed to, and actually his gambling, when we really looked into his gambling, he actually wanted the big win so that he could impress people. So at the core then of even his gambling was codependency, right? So it is very, very central addiction. When you think of it, why do people even maybe undereat? Often it can be an image thing. It can be more than that too. But I think it is a central addiction that leads to a lot of other addictions, and it's not named enough.
Yeah. How would you support somebody that has codependency through their recovery?
Okay. Well, first of all, if we're going to recover from anything, we have to know we're in it.
Yeah.
Okay. So naming it is really important. Then helping them to see their contribution to what they're doing and what they need to do differently. Well, maybe the second thing is also understanding where it came from, its origin. Yeah, and knowing it isn't their fault. And maybe understanding it too, if it's gone to the addiction stage. Addiction is an illness. Yeah, we don't ask for an illness. We have compassion for anybody who has an illness. If they have cancer, we have compassion for cancer. We have compassion for anybody who's got diabetes. So, I have compassion for myself that, I have recovery, I'm in recovery from alcoholism. So, we need to have compassion for codependency. It's just another addiction. And an addiction, if I can define addiction is when something has control over us and we don't have control over it. Okay? So if people have control over us and we don't have control over them, or the need of them, then that's an addiction. Right? So it's just like alcohol. When alcohol had control over me, when I went out, I'd always say I'm having one too, but I'd always find out I'd have more, right? So then it had control over me. I didn't have control over it. Yeah. So that's what I see as it's an addiction, it's an illness, and it needs to be treated. So when they're coming, you're asking me, how would you work with it? You'd name it. You'd understand its origins. Then you would actually you would stay away from whatever it is that is the addiction. Right? Abstinence from what it is. If it's the person, particularly if they're toxic, or if it's a substance, particularly if it's toxic, yeah. And you would continue with whatever treatment that you would go to your counselling, but you be honest with yourself, yeah. Then you would learn the tools. You would learn what it is you need to do differently, yeah. And we move forward, with that in that way.
So it's be treated like an addiction. Okay, and you have to go back through the years to find out where it came from and how it's progressed this far. Okay, so and then the treatment is how to get your needs met differently. So you stay away from that addictive person that is like your drug.
Mhm.
That's okay.
Mhm.
So it can be changed.
It depends if the person is toxic to you.
Yeah.
You see, it may not be, because it could be just you and you're actually clinging on to them. As I've often said in relationships, right? What makes a healthy relationship is two independent people coming together to be interdependent.
Mhm.
But sometimes what happens is when we are a codependent, we want enmeshed relationships, okay? Because we're very needy. So we need to become independent, right? Now, maybe as we become independent, the other person may be happy with that, and that's fine, or the other person may start to cling on to us, right? Then that's kind of toxic. And we, they need to grow too, they need to do their work. So it depends on what way the relationship, and if both are prepared to do their work. But what makes a healthy relationship is not a mesh relationship, but a interdependent relationship.
Yeah.